So welcome everybody to the Hummingbird series. I've got Elizabeth Barbour with me today, and she is somebody I've known for quite a long time. She's got a new book out, Sacred Celebrations, which we're going to be talking about. This book is a super powerful reference, and we'll talk about it. But Elizabeth has been in the transformational space for 23 years, helping people integrate mind, body, and spirit for wholeness. She's a business coach. She's a shamanic practitioner. She's an author. She's a speaker, and she's really like so good at creating celebrations and rituals. And this book is so awesome. So I'm super excited to have you here, Elizabeth. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. And you forgot to mention, show them your name on the cover too, because Sarah wrote the foreword for me, which I am so honored that you did that for me, Sarah.
I have never written a foreword for a book, but this one I was like, yes, I would like to. So this book is so fabulous. And one of the reasons, or one of the first stories that you told me really floored me, and just inspired me. So Elizabeth was going through a challenging divorce, and she started talking to me about how she got through that and the rituals that she created. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share a little bit about that, because I think rituals are so potent for me in particular when things are difficult.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I got divorced from my high school sweetheart when I was just 31, I think. And, we'd been together 15 years and married for, I don't know, 5.5 or so. And I had moved to Asheville, North Carolina, which I now live again. I had moved away and then I just moved back. But, and I was talking with a friend who had been divorced twice. And she said, "Oh, you need to do a divorce ritual." And I was like, "What? What's that?" And she sort of coached and guided me through what I could do. And what ended up happening, and I write about this in the book, but I ended up having 3 different divorce rituals. And so what I found was, by honoring the relationship, honoring and celebrating the marriage, what we learned, how we grew, how we both evolved as people and as humans, and what could I take from the relationship, and what did I wish for him in the future as well. Those conversations and that inquiry was really important, but also was getting out the anger and the anguish and the grief and the frustration. Because I think so often we try and sugarcoat and go, "Oh, well, it was awful, let's move on." It's like, no, you got to get that stuff out of your body. So I was like beating my furniture with a tennis racket, and I was throwing rocks off of cliffs when I would go hiking with friends. And I remember one night we actually had a, well, maybe I won't share that story. Involved a little alcohol.
It's all good. We accept it all here at Follow Your Feel Good.
That's right. But exactly that, right? Like, expressing anger feels good because you move it.
And the fact that you need 3 rituals, because I think a lot of us think, well, I did my grief ritual, now I should be good, I should feel fantastic. And what I've discovered through this process is, like, I do one ritual and I do feel relief, but then days or weeks later, all of a sudden, all that pain and anguish is right there again. So is that why you needed 3, or how did you come to the conclusion, or what have you learned about that?
Well, and that's a great question, Sarah, because I didn't set out to have 3 rituals. And I would say initially I wouldn't think of the first one as a ritual. It was actually the day that my divorce papers were served to me, because we had been living in one state and we both moved to different states. And so I actually got served the papers, which was, pretty traumatic. And I just emailed all my friends and I said, "Can you come meet me for pizza and beer?" And then so I took the paperwork, and they all sat around with me while we were drinking and having our pizza, and I signed the papers with them witnessing me. So it wasn't planned, it wasn't orchestrated, but it was very, very important to be witnessed in community like that. The second ritual was more private. That was my whole day, the day of the divorce, the day he went to the courthouse and, finalized all the paperwork. And I did a bunch of stuff at my home with lighting candles and burning things and rearranging things and getting rid of things, related to our marriage and our time together. And then he called me that evening And I had sent him some questions ahead of time. And we talked about all the things we loved about each other, what we were going to miss about each other, and what we wished for each other in the future. So it was a very sweet conversation. And
So
not to say that our
awesome.
divorce was sweet. It wasn't. It was
Okay.
painful, and it brought out the worst in both of us. But ultimately, we cared about each other. So, so
Yeah.
that was that one. And then the third one was that that evening I had invited a couple of girlfriends to come over. And so they brought me, a single woman's survival kit, and someone brought me some beautiful, inspirational poetry and some writings. And
Mm.
someone brought me a plant sort of symbolize new growth and new beginnings. So it was a beautiful little ritual. Yeah.
I love that so much. I feel like in our culture, we in the busyness and in the hurriedness and in the sort of siloed loneliness that many of us function in because we're busy or we're raising kids and we're working jobs and we're like barely have time to breathe sometimes. Rituals take time, but they don't take that much time. And what I love about your book, Sacred Celebrations, is like it really reminds us that we can do these things. They don't have to be complicated. You don't have to have a shaman there. You don't have to have a priest or a rabbi or anything like that. I mean, obviously you can if that's something that excites you for sure,
Sure.
but you can also do these things just in a really simple way. I wanted to talk too about the one of the other stories that's so touching in this book is the way the book opens, and you talk about losing your mother, your adoptive mom. And Elizabeth and I are both adoptive mothers, and so we share a lot of things that way. And again, when difficult things happen, because your relationship with your mom wasn't easy, it wasn't perfect, as no relationship is easy. So when we
Right.
lose a parent, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. That's not what I want to say. It's like when we lose a parent, it's never a perfect thing. Like relationships are there are things that were good about it, and there are things that were challenging or difficult, or things that were lacking there. But can you talk a little bit about how you did that ritual? Because I thought it was so beautiful, but yet so simple. And just maybe it'll give you guys who are listening some ideas about how to create a ritual about some loss that you've experienced.
Hmm. That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I still, it's funny you bring that up. I still get a little emotional thinking about that ritual because it's probably one of the most sacred ones that I've ever done. Yeah, when mom died, we were living in Texas, and she had moved to Houston because she was getting treatment at MD Anderson. And when she passed away, I knew that I was going to do her formal funeral, formal, in Florida because my dad had been buried there, 25 years prior. And so I was just going to do a regular funeral 3 weeks later. And, my family was all in Florida. And a friend in Houston said, Elizabeth, you have to do something here. She said, people want to show up for you. And I was like, wait, what? Like most of these women didn't even know my mom. So within just a couple of days, I pulled together what I called a white rose release ceremony and invited about 30, 35 women friends to come to my house. And what we did was we met at my home. I welcomed everybody, said a few words, handed out white roses to everybody, and then we walked from my home down by the creek where I lived, and we went to this beautiful bridge that was overlooking the water. And I did just sort of an impromptu ceremony. It wasn't completely planned. It was just sort of intuitive, like, okay, what are we going to do now? And
You kind of
I
mom's
invited,
history, or I remember you told her,
I'm sorry.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but like you told her story a little bit about her life and about some of the difficulties between you.
Yes, yes, I definitely did that. And so I shared with them both the challenges, but then also the good things about our relationship together. But then what we also did after I talked about me and my mom and that loss, I also made sure that we talked about all of our mothers and our grandmothers and our aunties and the women in our lives who really impact us. And we talked about those relationships. And as you were saying earlier, the complexities of those. You can love your mother and she can drive you crazy. And the same with your kid, right? And so we had those conversations intermingled with me talking about my mom and grieving that loss. So it was a really rich tapestry of what was happening there. And then at some point, I invited everybody to release their roses. And so we actually all threw them over the bridge together at the same time. And then the roses passed underneath the bridge. So it was almost like a symbolic representation of mom passing from this life to the next. It was beautiful.
So awesome. And I love the part where you invited everybody to speak their mothers, their aunties' names out loud. That just like that's what moved me this morning. And I was thinking, yeah, maybe we could just pause for a moment and just say our mother's names or whoever raised us, or just for a moment, because we're all together here listening. But yeah, just to remember them if they're here, or to thank them if they're already, not on this earth any longer. But I'll say my mom's name, Marilyn.
Yeah. And I had two mothers. An adopted mom was Joan, and then my birth mom, Kathy, just passed away this year.
Thank you. Yeah. Like a ritual can be so tiny, but so potent.
Well, and I actually have something to share with you about that. So related to my book, when I opened the book, what it's like when you get the first copy, and you're like, you've got your hands on it, you're like, oh my gosh. And so what I did was I brought the first copy of the book up to my ancestral altar, which is in my office, and I have photos of my parents, because my father's also on the other side too, and grandparents and some aunts and uncles, and I offered the book to them to say thank you. Thank you for sharing their stories. Thank you for, helping me to be who I am. And so, yeah, so that was like my own private little ritual that I actually haven't really told anybody about, but now you all are.
I love that. I too have made an ancestral altar, but like a lot of people who are listening might not know what that is. Just briefly, like why would somebody do that, or how do you use that? How do you create one? Just tell us a little bit about yours.
Yeah, I mean, mine is really simple, and I think you can do whatever you want. And I actually write about this in the book. There is a chapter about creating a home altar. But I remember my grandmother growing up. So my dad's brother had passed away when he was a very young man. He was only like 42. I was like 3 when he died. And my grandmother always had a photo of my Uncle Bill, and she had a fresh rose every time I would go visit her. And that was her altar. So very, very simple, but so precious and meaningful for her. For me, mine has pictures of my parents, because both my parents are on the other side now, plus now my birth mom and her husband, my stepdad. I've got pictures of grandparents. I also have representations of my kitty cats and my dogs that have passed away. I don't actually have photos of them, but I have little figurines that represent them for me. I have just a white candle. I usually put a glass of water up there. And then sometimes I make offerings. Sometimes I'll bring some big red gum for my dad, because he loved, cinnamon chewing gum, or I'll bring a cup of coffee. Maybe I'll put some cornmeal, tobacco. Those are some more traditional offerings. Yeah, I just, and some days I'm looking at it right now. Sorry, that's why I'm looking away from you. I'm like looking out there like, hey, everybody. And some days in front of it and talk to them. And other days I just kind of walk into the office and say, good morning.
Morning. One thing that happened to me when I made the first one that I made, and I just gathered photos and put it right in the living room, and I had a candle and some flowers there. And I remember what was so neat is that when my husband's parents came to visit for, I don't know if it was Easter or some holiday, and they were so touched. They were so touched to see them, their parents there. And it just meant so much. And I feel like that act in and itself, just creating the altar, created some kind of an ancestral healing. And so that was just so amazing. And I just think, yeah, whatever we feel called to do, like to give ourselves permission to do that, to create that. If someone was thinking they wanted to do maybe they know somebody who's going through something challenging and they wanted to offer them a ritual, like what might you suggest to them? Or if they asked you for advice, like, how do I go about doing this? and they know their friend was hurting, or maybe they're going through a divorce, or they lost a parent who's far away and they just want to do something for them. What might you offer to them?
Mhm. Well, I think the first thing to do is figure out what it is that you're needing. Are you needing to express grief or express anger or express gratitude? It could be D, all of the above, because often, that's what really happens in ritual, right? Like we get all of it. But I think first is identifying, okay, what's the goal here? What's the energy and what's the emotion that we're needing to move? And then thinking about, okay, so how do I want to be witnessed in that? Is this something that I want to be doing alone? Do I want to do it with one other friend? I mean, I've done a lot of rituals with just me and another girlfriend. I've done rituals with me and 2 or 3 other girlfriends, and I've done rituals with a dozen or more girlfriends. I've done rituals with my daughter. I've done them with my husband. So, there's a lot of different ways you can do that. So it's about, how do you want to be witnessed? And sometimes our rituals are private, and sometimes we want to be witnessed and engage with other people. And then I would really invite people to think about, how can you call in different elements? I always like to think about the 5 senses. So when you're thinking about a ritual, do you need sound? Do you need music, maybe to be uplifting, or do you need music that's sort of angry music so you can stomp around? Do you have smells that you might want to invite in? Maybe there's some essential oils or candles that you like. Maybe you can bring in nature elements. Say if you end up, let's use an example of doing a divorce ritual. You could gather some girlfriends and create some kind of an altar in nature. And so you could gather up, leaves and acorns and sticks and feathers and whatever, and, create some kind of a little altar together. So it's just that, how can you bring in those sensory elements to help you feel more connected to nature, to the divine, to spirit, whatever that is for you.
I love that. Oh, that sounds so beautiful, to gather in nature with friends to do something like that. And people could bring the feathers, or you could use found objects if it's a time of year where there are things to find. And
yeah,
sounds so lovely. Well, anything else that you want people to know about? Well, first of all, everybody needs to go out get this book. And if you're a coach or a yogi or something like that, I really feel like this is a great reference to help you just grab spontaneous ideas, because there's so many wonderful, like Elizabeth gives all these fabulous examples for every kind of ritual you can ever imagine. And so it's a great reference that you'll want on your bookshelf.
And can I add to that? And
Yes.
thank you for saying that, because actually, the more I lean into it, I do think it's a great reference for anybody who's doing healing work, coaches, therapists, as you said, like yoga instructors, acupuncturists, chiropractors, because you've got people who are sharing their stories of change and transition and grief and loss and celebration and exciting things too. And it's like, hey, say, I just wrote this book and you might want to check it out, because I do think it's a good resource. Hopefully it's going to stay on people's bookshelves for a long time. So
yeah, it's one of the big things that I suggest to my clients, when oftentimes when we have these, what I like to think of, the invisible losses. We lost a job. I mean, there's no funeral, there's no body to bury. Even now as an artist, I've been thinking about, Julia Cameron talks about our creative losses, the book proposal that didn't get taken, the show that didn't, whatever you feel like there's something to grieve. A ritual can help with that, and then free up all the beautiful energy so you can step forward in a good, sort of peaceful way, without it coming back to bite you later. I think that's what it's for. It helps us move things, like you said.
Well, and that's so true, Sarah. And I think so often we get stuck because we don't properly end whatever the cycle is that needs to end, whether it's a relationship or a job or a move or, whatever. But when we properly complete that, then it creates the space for that new beginning to be clear and aligned and authentic and congruent.
Absolutely. Well, it's been such a delight to talk with you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Book, you guys, Sacred Celebrations. You can get it anywhere books are sold, including the giant online beast that has we shall not name, but
yeah,
it is, and it's wonderful. Congratulations, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.